Hello and welcome to Drive and Double Feature Podcast. I'm Nathan,
I'm Ryan.
and this is the podcast where we talk about two movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into today's movie, I want to talk to you about our Patreon over at patreon.com/Drive and Double Feature Podcast. We do a lot of fun stuff over there. I think our most recent episodes, we did a little flick chart, and we also talked about our favorite movie trailers. So if that sounds interesting to you, only costs $5 a month, but there's no main content locked behind there.
I'd
But
pay
on
$5 for that.
Me too. I would if I could, but I we run the thing, so I don't know. I guess it doesn't work that way. um, but this week we are back at it with Bondzilla. We got a monster flick and James Bond, and today we're talking about our James Bond movie, Never Say Never Again, from 1983, directed by Irvin Kershner. It's a really famous director who made RoboCop 2. Also, I was doing a little digging and come to find out he also made, this crappy movie Star Wars we keep finding.
Yeah.
He made a sequel to that movie. Empire
What?
like Fights Back or something. I don't know how that got a sequel, but I bet you it's worse than the original. I can only
I
imagine.
it might be one of those where it's like an unrelated sequel type of thing, sort of
Yeah.
like American Psycho 2, where they just slap a title on another movie.
Yeah, that must be it. But yes, this same director made Never Say Never Again. This is a weird James Bond because it is not a part of the Eon canon. We've kind of talked about this before. It's popped up, especially with Thunderball. I think we talked about this. There was a lot of legal issues with specifically the James Bond novel Thunderball, and the producer Jack Schwartzman. He owned the rights to Thunderball, specifically that story. And it was just a huge fight for years. They planned on making movies in the 70s. It never happened. But 1983, we were able to get that from a completely different company. And guess who's back? Sean Connery. And that's where the name comes from. He said he would never play James Bond again. And guess what? He's playing James Bond again, which he said he would never do again after this one. But we don't talk about video games here normally, but he did the voice in From Russia with Love. So once
And
again,
he and then he said he'd never do it again, and now we're still waiting for the next one.
whenever that'll happen, let's hope. I would love to see it. If anything, I love seeing Sean Connery as James Bond. Don't get me wrong. I'm always happy to see the guy. Even if Diamonds Are Forever was a little bit of a disappointment, and was this one a disappointment? I won't reveal how I felt yet, but it definitely was. Actually, it's funny. So you've heard really bad things about this movie, right?
Right.
So have I, but I was looking at reviews. They were pretty positive back in the day, which is very surprising. And I guess it's more of a retrospect thing. A lot of fans look back on this one in a very negative light because it is
So it
very different.
so it's like the opposite of Halloween 3, where everyone was like, this movie
Mhm.
sucks when it came out, but now everyone's like, no, it's actually good.
Yeah, exactly. It is the opposite of Halloween 3. Does that mean that it's cool to hate Halloween 3 again?
Um, well, now it's
Or
over. Now it's overrated.
yeah, now it's overrated. Okay, yeah, cool. Good to
Before
know.
it was just like, oh, how could they type of thing, and now it's like, well, now everyone talks about it too much.
Yeah, I'll put that opinion in my brain. That's become my opinion now on this movie.
Please.
Yes. But anyway, Never Say Never Again. It's just I can't state it enough. Really odd movie. I completely forgot that it was based off a Thunderball. And it opens the same way. And I was like, God, I've seen this before. And I was like, oh yeah, this is like the whole Thunderball plot, which is the only James Bond book I've read. So that's like even double the work for me. It's like, oh yeah, I've already seen all this and read all this.
So is this one more faithful to the novel than the other movie?
From what I remember, no, not really. Especially like we'll get into like a scene in the casino specifically later on.
Oh well, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's that. Yeah.
Yeah. There, I mean, like in the ending, I guess we'll get into it, but you know what? That's a good question because I didn't really think about it. The boat stuff is actually pretty similar to the book. But anyway, Never Say Never Again. We always talk about opening title sequences with James Bond, right? Isn't this one just like all the other ones? It's got Sean Connery just killing like people in a jungle to the theme.
Yeah, I mean that's I just like how I expected James Bond. You could throw this one right in there, and I couldn't tell which one it was.
Oh yeah, no, it's just the same. No, it's really odd. So this movie does a thing. It's like it's trying to tread a very interesting ground. It's trying to be different than a James Bond movie, but it's definitely at times riffing on it as well. It's like it doesn't quite know if it wants to be a copycat or if it wants to be a brand new thing.
Well, and that I was. Did you watch the behind the scenes?
I actually didn't get a chance to watch behind the scenes.
So I watched it, because there is a little shorter documentary than like just like the other ones, but this one I
Mm-hmm.
also had a making of. And the problem with this movie is that this movie, because there was already Thunderball made
Mm-hmm.
and there was already a book, and because like the whole reason was there was like the big dispute between like the book and the writers. It's like Ian Fleming took full credit for writing the book, but it was like, well, no, actually, it was um, more than just him working on the book. And
No.
anyway, he ended up losing that legal battle, and so when it came time to actually make this movie, they had to follow the book um, pretty closely, and it's like they could not copy, like they could call the guy James Bond, they could do anything that was in the book, but they couldn't do anything that was copying the movie Thunderball
Mm-hmm.
at all. And because they said they had a team of lawyers that would look over like the script a bunch just to be like, is this too similar to Thunderball? I was like, is this really too, like, it just was kind of like this big, like, there was red tape everywhere when making this movie. So
Yeah, it sounds like a
that's what,
nightmare.
yeah, it was. And I mean, if you listen to Irvin Kershner and the screenwriters, it was a very frustrating process. And um, it was kind of like, it was just kind of like they couldn't really do what they actually wanted to do. And so I guess the reason why they put the song though, and like even like almost everyone in the production said they hated putting that song like at the beginning of the
It doesn't
movie.
make sense. It really doesn't.
No, it doesn't. And because two, I mean, one, it doesn't even look like a James Bond intro. And
Mhm.
two, it's like James Bond is murdering these people in the beginning of the movie, and it's this really slow moving love song, like never say never. And it doesn't fit at all. And
No, yeah, and it's just like really unfitting, and it's already just not a really good song in my opinion. So I mean, we're not going to rank this one later, but it just all around doesn't work.
well, it'd be an easy ranking for me because it would be the worst.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
uh,
definitely.
so that wouldn't be much of a challenge. But so it was just kind of like, well, they're like, we have to make a Bond movie, but we can't make it look exactly like the other Bond movies. So it's kind of like that old meme. It's just like, here, like, can I copy your homework? Like, sure, just change the words a bit, and it's just like almost looks like kind of the same, but not really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like a weird like gray area. But this one, what I like about this one, instead of like in the original Thunderball, where Sean Connery gets sent to the health clinic, just like, oh, you know what, you need to work on that. This time he gets sent to the health clinic because he's just old. Sean Connery looks old in this one, and he's just like, oh well, you need, like, his boss is just like, hey, you need to go there because you're getting out of shape because he lost his like training mission at the beginning because it was all a what do you call that? It was all fake.
Training
It
exercise.
was a training exercise. Thank you. And he got stabbed by the hostage. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I like the premise of like the opening where it's kind of like this much older Bond, and they even say that he was kind of pulled out of the field um, at the time. So he was kind of like in this lull period. So that's why he was doing these training exercises, because he even said
Mhm.
like, I guess I think like in the context of science of the world is that he was like a teacher at that point, or at least like
Yeah.
leading training exercises or training new agents.
Hmm.
And but I do like the idea of like an older Bond like getting back out there type of thing. I'd like
Hmm.
that, and I think too. I actually like the health club sequence in this one, maybe
Me
even
too.
slightly a little better than the original one.
No, I totally agree. I guess I was reading about this sequence in particular. The health club sequence is written by a couple like British sitcom writers. So I think it has a little bit of a funnier tinge to it, and I actually kind of like that a lot. And it doesn't have an awkward scene of Bond forcing himself on a woman, blackmailing her, which is, well, that doesn't happen till later. But anyway,
It's really nice seeing Sean Connery back in the role
yeah,
too. Like,
and he seems like he cares more. I actually like his performance as James Bond here better than his performance in Diamonds Are Forever.
yeah, I really was getting into like the first half of the movie because
Hmm.
I was like, wow, it's like it's really is like an old shoe. You put it back on. It's like it feels
Hmm.
very comforting. And I even like the sequence where he's beating up like the strong man type of guy. He's like
Hmm.
uh it does have like this the common tropes from the first one, or like the beat for beat almost, except this one he does fight like a really super powered guy. And what I like about this one too is like Bond gets his ass kicked a bunch.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he's definitely out of his element. He gets thrown around by this guy. He's got that like whip that like breaks through the briefcase. And he has to win. It's really silly, but it made me laugh where he wins by splashing. I guess he's like in a room with like specimens of people's urine, and he splashes one of them in the dude's face, and come to find out it's James Bond's pee. Splashes him in the face and makes him fall backwards and stab himself. I thought it was a silly little bit.
Yeah, that part I was like, because I was like, if you get pee thrown in your face, it's just like he was screaming in
Well, yeah,
agony,
I
like
thought it was
ah,
acid.
yeah.
Yeah, unless James Bond really has some nasty pee. I I don't know.
Guy has like a phobia of piss, and it's just like that's piss.
Your one weakness, piss. Uh, but I like how Bond has to use like actual tools against this guy. Another part that was funny in that same fight was he pulls out that giant wooden board and like trips him as he's walking down the stairs. It's really goofy. But it's here we kind of get set up for the rest of the plot because there is a Bond villain named Blush, and she's controlling somebody with a fake eye. It's actually the president's eye that, and she's using him. What has he got? He's got him hooked on heroin. It looks like some kind of drug, to keep him in line, and he uses his eye to take control of warheads, which of course, Largo, who is our main bad guy here, can take a hold of them. And you know what? Blofeld shows up in this one, and it's played by Max von Sydow, who is way like underused. I know they were planning on making sequels, and I know that's like the only reason they got him. Otherwise, he doesn't do anything.
How could they even make a sequel to this movie? I don't even like, but they just
I don't know.
because I mean, I don't think I mean, because doesn't Eon like own all the Ian Fleming novels pretty
Yeah,
much, or the
I
film rights to them?
reading about it. It was going to be called Spectre, which we got one of those later. But yeah, they did plan on making a sequel to it, but I guess it just never worked out. I don't know
Right.
how they would have done it either. And it probably didn't need to be made. It definitely works as like a curiosity. I think the first half of this movie actually works really well for me. I actually was like, wow, this really isn't as bad as they say. And I still think it's not as bad as they say, but we'll get into the second half of this movie later.
Yeah. like I said, it really works really well, and I, I they were kind of again they were kind of explaining Blofeld in this one. They're
Mm-hmm.
like, because they really didn't want to go for a more cartoony type of Bond where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, he doesn't have an eye patch on, like, nobody has any gold teeth or big, like, but just
Mm-hmm.
they didn't want to make any type of silly characters in this one. They're like, oh yeah, he looks like a temporary businessman or whatever, and he does, but I'm like, he really didn't even need to be in this movie. It just
Mm-mm.
completely just does not affect the plot at all, other than
No,
like, oh hey Largo, go take care of this problem for us.
exactly. It's kind of weak and unnecessary, but we do get Largo here, our main bad guy. I actually liked him in this movie quite a bit. He wasn't like an overblown villain. He seemed kind of like he was smiling a lot and talking to his like henchmen, and like he seemed like a real, like, closer to a real person. And I actually thought that was an interesting take on the character. I actually think his performance is really solid here. Um,
uh the one character who I did not like the interpretation of was M in this movie,
yes, yeah.
because they were making him like, it's so adversarial to James Bond, where it was just like, James, like, I remember like James was like trying to explain that Spectre had infiltrated this health club, and yeah, but he's trying to explain that Spectre is behind all this, and they're just like, Bond, what are you talking? Just like doesn't even realize like what's going on, because he just, like I said, Bond had to beat up this guy at the health spa, and Bond's trying to relay this information that's happened, and
Hmm.
M just is just like, what are you doing getting involved in all this? He basically thinking like Bond is just up to mischief again. Like, did you sleep with the man's wife or something like that? Is that why you freaked out on him? And
Like, no, I was gonna say, yeah, I think he's definitely weak, but he's gone from the movie pretty quickly into it too. I'm
I
trying to
just didn't
think.
understand why he didn't argue with him in the first place. So it's just like, I mean, like, it's not like he's got like this bad reputation.
Yeah, no, he's done a lot of good for you, but for whatever reason now it's like he hates him. Now that he's a teacher, the guy just hates teachers.
I guess so.
Yeah. One funny scene though is the scene where they're driving after the warheads are stolen, and the guy is just driving on the road. The henchman Blush shows up and just throws a snake into his car, and that causes him to flip and crash into a building.
Oh, I know that's the part. Yeah, like where she just throws a snake into his lap.
Yeah, I thought that was really funny. Um, but let's
Do you think you would crash a car if somebody threw a snake into your car?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would probably freak out. How am I supposed to know what type of snake that is? I don't know. Would I take the time to pull over calmly, stop the car?
Be like, oh, let me just pull over here, snake in my lap.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Whoopsie. That was an accident from them. I'm gonna
Well, that
apologize.
I think the main thing to learn is don't ever drive with your windows down.
Where the movie goes, is kind of a wild goose chase. And it leads Bond everywhere. I forget, does he go to the casino first or does he go to the Bahamas first?
I
Or is
think
the
he
casino in the
goes.
Bahamas?
I think he goes to the Bahamas first.
Okay, yeah, so he ends up in the Bahamas and we get to see Mr. Bean there. Uh,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I started cheering when I saw him.
me too. You know what? He's kind of funny in this. Isn't his name Small Faucet?
Yes,
Yeah, he's kind of funny. I'll give it to him. He is funny in this role. I feel it's really odd that he's in it, but
yeah, a
it's
little
fine.
bit. Well, I
Um,
mean, he wasn't even Mr. Bean wasn't even a thing then.
yeah, I want to say this is like his film debut, maybe. Don't quote me.
Could I'm quoting you.
Yeah. But he plays such a minor role in this movie, honestly. It ends up just being Bond swimming around. He runs into Blush, and Blush there tries to kill him like multiple times. It becomes like a silly like it's like really silly. Her it's just becoming obsessed with killing Bond this entire movie. He's like, I have to be the one who does it.
Well, not before sleeping with him.
Oh, of course, in one of the most awkward sex scenes I've ever seen, where it's like on a ship, and it's like half covered by the door. It seems like an Austin Powers gag because she's like hanging out the edge of the door, like looking like she's having the time of her life. It's really
I,
goofy.
I I think this is the first time we actually see Bond having sex, though.
Yeah, it doesn't cut. Yeah, it's like a real sex scene, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see anything, but it's just like obviously like two shirtless people like just kissing.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it was just like, oh, okay. I didn't realize
That's
they were going to do that.
that's why they're making this one different. Oh, and
The
we haven't.
X-rated Bond.
That probably happens, or that probably has happened. I was trying to think of
Wait,
the man with the golden gun. It's not what you think. Uh, but yeah, I mean, we haven't talked about the Bond girl here yet because she doesn't show up until a little bit later. It's Kim Basinger. Kate,
she's Domino,
yep, she plays Domino. Who do you think did Domino better?
the other girl.
I agree that the other girl did it better. Kim here, I don't really like her.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, she's been in. I mean, obviously, LA Confidential. You know, she's
Yes.
great in that, but she's very early in her career, and it shows, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
but she's playing the part of Domino, so she's Largo's girl, and James Bond coming in to swoop her away from him.
Exactly. And I mean, this doesn't even happen in the Bahamas. I'm not gonna lie. I think the Bahamas plot is very inconsequential for the rest of the movie, right? He kind of goes, finds out what he needs, and he's out. He just sleeps with Blush, and Blush blows up his hotel room. But good thing James Bond is sleeping with another woman in another room.
Right. Well, you forgot the part two where James Bond fights a shark.
Oh, I did forget about that because there's obviously some kind of, well, actually, this is a little fun fact. I don't know if they went over this behind the scenes with these sharks. Real sharks, by the way, real sharks that they got. But I guess if sharks stop swimming, they die, right? So overnight, they would keep them in an area where they couldn't swim, and they resuscitated them in the morning and brought them back to life.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I'm sure that was great for him.
oh yeah, wonderful. And there's even that one scene when they're fighting, and the shark's trying to get through the door, and the stunt actor is just like trying to like shut the door on the shark, and he's like, the shark's getting caught in the door. It's really messed up, actually. Not I'm not a shark fan, but I don't want to see a shark get hurt.
Now, does this one did this movie have there are no animals filmed on set?
I don't know because once again later this isn't even like the worst animal abuse in this movie in my opinion. Uh,
Oh, with the horse.
yeah, the horse. Yeah, you can't tell me that because that horse really jumped off of like the ledge and lands in that water. That could not have been good for that horse.
Well, yeah, the horse lands on its back too in the water.
Yeah,
And
I wasn't a fan.
well, I mean, it does show the horse like, oh, swimming like he's okay, folks, don't worry. And
That's movie
meanwhile,
magic. That was the
me,
fourth horse.
yeah, I was about to say that's probably like horse number three.
Yeah, and I don't know. I do think that's a little iffy, of course. If anybody remembers my famous stance I took a long time ago on this podcast,
Right. You said
uh,
animals should be killed to make movies.
it's more artistic that way. Um, but there is a casino scene a little bit later. This is after we actually get to meet this movie's Felix Leiter, who is fine.
Fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really nothing special.
This casino special.
Yeah. So in the back, behind all of the poker tables and everything, is an arcade. And I kind of love the visual of people dressed up in suits and looking nice, and they're playing like Galaga.
Well, I've seen this movie before. It's been a very, very long time,
Gotcha.
but I had forgotten pretty much everything except I knew they played video games in this movie.
Yeah, because it's so weird, right? It's like it's kind of modern in a way, because like they like it's like a tournament, like people are watching this like sport.
It's like a big like, well, instead of them doing Monte Carlo or or whatever, or Texas Hold'em or whatever, it's just them just them
Playing a
play
video
video games.
games. It's
But yeah, I love the visual of like people in tuxedos, like, oh, let's put them, let's play this Pac-Man or whatever.
yeah, it's kind of funny. And the video game, because of course, it's not like Texas Hold'em or like you said, the main bad guy and Bond play a video game against each other, but not a real video game. Probably one of the most convoluted video games I've ever heard of. It's like called Domination, and you have like a piece of land all across the world, and you have to click different points of the land to get points, but you also have a stash of warheads that you can shoot at the enemy to make them lose. But you also have a shield that can block this. And also, it causes real pain to you as time goes on. So that when you hold the joystick, it hurts you as well. Insane. It makes no sense.
And when I think of video games, I think Sean Connery knows his way around the video game.
Oh, yeah. He definitely knew what was going on. Do you think he
Well,
had
why do
played a
you,
video game before this?
well, why do you think he did From Russia with Love, the video
Oh,
game?
yeah. He loves video, not for money. He
He
wouldn't do anything for money.
did it for the love of the game.
Exactly. He's played every James Bond game ever. But why isn't this a real video game? That's all I'm asking.
It probably is. Did you look?
I didn't. I bet you somebody has done it, but I bet you nobody's gone the full extra mile and made it hurt you while you're playing, electrocute you.
No, but they do. I remember I have seen like video games that can actually hurt you. I've seen like those.
Yeah,
Have you
yeah.
seen where like you play like Pong, and if you get a goal scored on you, it like starts to whip in your hand.
I did not know about this. This is the thing.
Well, yeah, and you like if you take your hand off, because that's why I would think like whenever they would do, I was like, that's got to be like from James Bond, like when they did
Hmm.
that, because like you put your hand on a little pad and then you have one hand like move the knob, and whenever you get somebody scores a goal on you, like it starts like whipping you with this little cable thing, and if you go, ow, it hurts, and you like pick your hand up, you lose.
That's kind of fun, but you wouldn't catch me playing it. Am I gonna put in a quarter to be whipped on the hand? Um,
I mean, yeah, I put more money in.
yeah, I said that and I was like, well, people might think that's a steal. Uh, but we get a really awkward scene because Bond starts hitting on Domino, and she's all in for it. And they dance together at the casino and in front of everybody, the both of them. It's kind of just an odd
Yeah.
offhand scene. Before this, he massages her, pretends to be a masseuse to get some information out of her. And it's really awkward because she finds out, because the real masseuse comes in, and she's like, "Oh, that guy wasn't here to massage you. He is an masseuse," and she smiles. Could you imagine
Yeah.
somebody paying for a service and someone being like, "Oh, that person just massaged you. They don't work here." I wouldn't
Well,
smile.
yeah, and she's naked too, and he's like, and even like Sean Connery's like, "Oh, I need you to turn over, darling," and just she turns over, and he's like, obviously like just staring,
Yeah,
and
ogling her.
so yeah, that'd be like a nightmare, like.
Yeah, like that does seem, it seems like a horror movie, like the ghost masseuse. Um,
Well, I think we can start talking about the second half of the movie, but
yeah. Go
I,
ahead.
I didn't like the second half of the movie.
No,
It is very 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 slow. I don't normally get bored during a Bond movie, but like I was really starting to get bored.
yeah, dude. It was so boring, and I was like, I was liking it more because if you remember right, I didn't love Thunderball. I still don't really love Thunderball. At first, I was like, I think this could be better. But no, the ending is just boring. I mean, I told Ryan, and I was really tired, but it probably is the
Okay,
movie
yeah.
too. But I did fall asleep. And I did go back and rewatch what I did, and I was just like, man, nothing happens in the last half of this movie. Well, a lot happens, but nothing interesting.
No, I mean the most interesting thing is there's a motorcycle chase.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the motorcycle chase, which is cool.
Yeah, but it's just very, very dull. I mean, um, like even like when we actually do start leading up to the climax, like just getting jumping towards the end,
Hmm.
where they have like the big underwater fight scene, like in Thunderball, where it's like they have like 100 guys underwater fighting each other.
Hmm.
Um, and this one, it's like you wouldn't even think this would be like the end of the movie. It was so like subtle, like but like so downplayed you wouldn't even think about it. Like they're
Hmm.
just fighting underwater and just moving around like really awkwardly, and then out of nowhere he just gets shot with a harpoon by a domino, and they're just like, oh, I,
Yeah.
I guess that was it.
Yeah, it's just very like I don't know, it's not well done. I mean, like remember the original Thunderball, they like have multiple people fighting under the water. It's like kind of like an army in a way, and they're fighting each other, or Domino shooting Largo in the back with the gun, which is on the boat, not in the water. I think that was much better done. Way more, way better
Well,
done.
Well, yeah, and I mean it's just a much more exciting sequence. You got
Hmm.
Largo driving the boat at a high speed and he ends up crashing the boat and explodes. Like it's a really big,
Hmm.
memorable moment. And this one is just very, very slow. And again, Irvin Kershner was not a fan of this too. He was just
Hmm.
like did not want to do an underwater sequence, but it was because it was in the book. They had to do some type of underwater
Makes
thing in
sense.
there. And he was just like, it's very awkward. You can't really do a whole lot. He said, other than people like thrashing around and maybe trying to pull their air supply, it doesn't really lend itself well to like a really exciting movie.
I've been saying this for this whole podcast, and it takes him to say this. Okay.
Well, now I
Uh,
agree with them.
yeah, now you agree. No, but I agree. And I mean, I don't even really want to go in that depth with it because it's nothing really fun happens except for Kim Basinger gets sold as an as a wife to a bunch of Arabic people, or she almost gets sold that way, which is really weird. And then yeah, otherwise just nothing interesting. He like goes through catacombs, which you think would be interesting, right? Like he knocks over a rock and knocks over people, but that's not. It wasn't even really that fun.
No, and I mean it's just very, very slow moving Bond movie.
Mhm.
Doesn't doesn't do a whole lot, but I mean, I think what it is they all kind of had their hands tied by
Mm.
this movie. It was just like, well, we can't really deviate too far. We can't really rehash any of the same scenes that were in the original movie, so we kind
Mhm.
of have to do our own thing. But um, like even Sean Connery, they didn't interview him for this one, but they were just commenting, like Sean Connery was basically like, well, this isn't the movie I really signed up for. I thought it was going to be kind of like a real, like, like more of like a Bond, but like a Bond that's, like trying to regain his former glory or whatever. So,
Mhm.
uh, by all accounts, like not a lot of people were not satisfied with this movie,
Yeah, it
and
makes sense.
even Irvin Kershner said if he could, he would love to have remade this movie and actually been able to do what he wanted.
Yeah, and I would have liked to seen that because I do think there is hints at something really good here. I guess it's fun to watch a James Bond movie that's not Casino Royale and is like not Eon. And like there are parts here that I like, and I like the idea of an aging Sean Connery coming back to be Bond. But you're right. I just you hit the nail on that. I think they just had their hands tied and they just ended up making something that had to be boring and they couldn't really take the big leaps because like what we talked about, it's aging Bond. They don't really get to use that. That's kind of at the beginning of the movie, but by the end, he's just doing the same thing. It's not really him dealing with his age anymore, which I think that would have been a really interesting angle.
Yeah, and it's just not one that's very memorable. And I mean, getting into it, I didn't really care for this movie
No,
altogether. No,
unfortunately.
it's probably, if we're including everything we've watched so far, um, it's not the worst. It's still Casino Royale,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's
this is actually at least watchable for half the movie.
yeah. But I don't know if it beats the other Eon movies though.
Yeah, I can't really think of an Eon movie that's worse. I would rather, yeah, you know what? Thinking about it, I would much rather watch any of the other ones.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was like, I'd rather watch Diamonds Are Forever. I'd rather watch Through Your Eyes Only. I'd rather watch any one of the, like any of the other
Mhm.
like underperforming ones. So I think this one would probably be towards the bottom.
Yeah. So if we were to go back and re-rank Sean Connery's, it wouldn't matter. It would end up at the bottom anyway. Um,
Yeah, but wouldn't matter.
yeah. Well then I think that wraps it up. I guess to like talk about box office, this one was a hit still. Surprisingly, it still made quite a bit of money, not as much as Octopussy, which is the movie that it battled against, but it makes you wonder because this came out after Octopussy. If this had made it out before, would it have made more money? Was it based off of like people already seeing Bond or not? But it cost 36 million and made 160 million. It's a pretty big hit, but there's nothing they could do after it. Like you said, they probably planned a sequel, but there's probably nothing they could do.
Yeah, and like I said, this one does rank towards the bottom as far as like Bond fans, like when they
Yeah.
pick Bond movies.
Yep.
And but yeah, it was, which is a shame because like I said, I was enjoying the first half and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, well, if it keeps this pace up, it might even be better than Thunderball, but it fell quite a bit.
Yep, exactly. And that's why I don't recommend it. I really don't. If you're, looking for Bond movies, you don't gotta watch this.
This one's completely skippable, yeah.
Yeah. But that wraps it up for this one, and Bond will return. The real James Bond will return in A View to a Kill. But
Perfect.
Ryan, what are we going to be talking? Well, Ryan, remind us what we're going to be talking about on Thursday.
Well, Nathan, we are going to be talking about Matango. It is streaming right now on the Criterion Channel and Tubi for free right now.
Thanks, Tubi. But I'm excited to make sure and go out and watch that on Tubi. Uh, say that. I am excited to watch that. But if you enjoyed today's episode or if you have any recommendations, be sure to email us at driveanddoubleFeaturePodcast@gmail.com. You can also X at us at DIDFpod over on X.com. And as a reminder, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/driveanddoubleFeaturePodcast. But until next time.
Until next time.